They say you got to wait 3 years to truly grade an NFL draft. So that's what we're doing today on Locked On 49ers. We're going back in time to 2019 and regrading the San Francisco 49ers 2019 draft right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. If you don't know us, I'm Brian Peacock, NFL analyst, co-host of the Peacock and Williamson NFL show right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My co-host Eric Crocker, former NFL AFL defensive back, Arena Bowl champion, and the co-host of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast as well, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Both of us double dip in here, and Croc showing off his hardware if you're watching this on YouTube, which you should be subscribing to. And thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Croc, let's go back in time to the year 2019 and talk about probably one of the most important drafts for this regime for the San Francisco 49ers. And it takes, and I agree, it takes some time to grade a draft. But Croc, I got to say, I went back because I don't have my draft grades written down anywhere. They're in podcast form. And you weren't my co-host back in 2019. But I went back today and listened to my podcast the day after the draft and my draft grades. And I got to say, I don't think I'm going to change that much. There's one guy I'm going to change the grade on.
Jalen Hurd.
No. A little bit later in the draft than that. Hold on. We'll get to that stuff. But, man, I liked the Nick Bosa pick. I gave the Nick Bosa pick an A. But really, when you look at the 49ers draft, with the way that the Niners were coming off a bad season in 2018, Garoppolo was hurt. They earned the number 2 overall pick for a reason. And they might have been picking number 1 if they could have beaten or if they would have lost to the Cardinals, right? Because I think the Cardinals beat the Niners twice, and that was the Cardinals' only 2 wins that year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Crazy like that.
With Josh Rosen.
With the Rosen, or I don't even know if Rosen even played. He might have played one of those games.
He played both.
Did he play both of them?
Yeah.
It's crazy and it's pretty insane. And this is one of the things I talked about during that draft recap and in the grades from right after the 2019 draft, that podcast, is it was pretty amazing that the Cardinals had the guts to go back-to-back quarterbacks. I think a lot of teams would have said, well, we took a top 10 quarterback. We're not taking one. It just doesn't happen. And they got it right. They moved on from the bad quarterback in Rosen, and they got a much better quarterback in Kyler Murray at number 1 overall. It'd have been really easy for the Cardinals in 2019 to sit there and say, gosh, Nick Bosa is the best player regardless of position. We just drafted a top 10 quarterback. Let's develop that guy and draft Nick Bosa. That would have been the easier thing for the Cardinals to do, but they did the hard thing is they went back and got another quarterback in Kyler Murray, and it was the right move. So you got to credit them for that, even though they screwed up the pick before. So I don't even know how you let your GM stick around to make that pick at that point, but I think Steve Keim does have some naughty photos of owner Michael Bidwell somewhere, and he's going to have that job for a while because in my opinion, he should have been fired a long time ago, but it's pretty remarkable, right?
Yeah, that roster was really bad. And Josh Rosen stepped into it, and you could have made all the excuses. I won't even say excuses, but we see that a lot. Teams drafted the teams in the top 10, which I believe maybe did Arizona have to trade up for Rosen?
There was a lot of trades. I know the.
Okay, so that was Sam Darnold. So the Jets traded up, I believe, with the Colts, and they drafted Sam Darnold. The Buffalo Bills traded up for Josh Allen.
Yes.
I know that. And I mean, as it pertains to quarterbacks, I know Lamar Jackson, the Ravens traded back into that last pick in the first round, I believe it was, to draft Lamar Jackson. But Josh Rosen, I think they traded up for him. I think they did.
I kind of feel like they did too.
I'm looking it up right now as we speak, but I believe they traded up to like top 10, number 10 overall.
The listing I'm looking at doesn't show the trades. I got to look at a different website to see about the trades. But I feel like there was I feel like every quarterback, except for the number 1 overall guys, get traded up for, right? It's just more often than not it happens.
But anyway, Josh Rosen was supposed to be the most pro-ready quarterback in that class.
Yeah, well, because
that was his thing coming out of UCLA.
Yeah.
And his biggest knock was obviously like the kind of lack of athleticism, which I mean we see that at times with some quarterbacks like him. But who he was as a person, I guess he had like interest outside of football, and that was kind of a big issue, I guess, with some people, just the way he kind of came off a little bit. But him as a quarterback, it's like people loved him. It's like pretty thrower of the football and all that type of stuff.
And he had the pedigree. He was a big time recruit. He had good footwork. He was like a big time tennis player and was really good as a fret right away, you know. So it was really weird. And I think the thing, to be honest with you, I don't think it was the talent that did him in. I think he didn't care. And that was one of the knocks. It was like, personality's interesting with him. And I really think in the end, Josh Rosen didn't care enough to be great. That's the vibe I get with Josh Rosen, that it wasn't necessarily a talent thing with him. He came for money, like he didn't have to fight for it. You know what I mean? It was kind of, you know, not that everybody who comes from money can't become a great player, but it just didn't feel like he had that internal drive. And there was whispers about that even before the draft, and then a lot more loud whispers after the draft.
Right. But yeah, so I mean, we were talking about that draft and how, you know, they definitely could have easily taken Nick Bosa, but kudos to them for
they got it right.
Not compounding a mistake, I guess.
And so that left the 49ers was really no choice. There was a lot of arguments. Do you remember the 2019 draft? There's always arguments every year, but you know, it was like Quinnen Williams, I think, was close. But it was like Nick Bosa was the pick. There was no other pick to be made. Nick Bosa was the guy, and a lot of people like Josh Allen. There was some
Josh Allen, edge rusher out of Kentucky, not
the Kentucky edge rusher that ended up going to the Jaguars. I was a big fan of Brian Burns, but you weren't going to take him number 2, right? So I
didn't see him drop into, I believe, 17? He was 16th overall. Didn't see that, but
little excessive for him to fall that far. But you know, Quinnen Williams, Cleveland Farrell.
Quinnen Williams, I think that was a real conversation.
Yeah, it was
putting him next to Buckner at that time. So you got Buckner, you got Quinnen Williams. You know,
but in the end, it was like
Armstead.
It was Bosa. It was Bosa. Like there was no other pick to be made. So the Niners definitely didn't screw it up. Good on them. It was an A grade that I gave him at the time. And it looks even better now, right? It's an A. It's an A+. Nick Bosa at number 2. The only thing, Nick Bosa had the injury and missed an entire year pretty much. Other than that, Nick Bosa's been just a stud and a difference maker. So there's no other grade to give Nick Bosa other than the A that he already had. Next, let's get a little bit deeper in this draft. We talked about how things went at the start. Let's start talking about round 2 and beyond. And the 49ers got another difference maker on the offensive side of the ball, though, this time in Deebo Samuel with their second round pick. And we'll go through all of the 8 selections the 49ers made in the 2019 draft and regrade those selections now with 3 years of hindsight. But first, I want to tell the folks out there about Dave. You know Dave? You should. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch, need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE, Dave. Sign up for extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On 49ers your first listen. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NFL Draft and the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Go subscribe on Locked On NFL YouTube channel to that one, or all of your audio podcast providers. We've got an A forever and always for the 49ers first pick, number 2 overall, Nick Bosa in that draft. But I was a little shocked at the way the wide receivers went off the board, the order that the wide receivers went off the board that year. But one thing I was not shocked about is the 49ers drafting Deebo Samuel, number 36 overall. I had him in every mock draft to the 49ers because it was clear that he was a fit stylistically for Kyle Shanahan. He was the best player at the Senior Bowl that the 49ers were at and coaching. So they were coaching him. Kyle Shanahan had him in his Z receiver position, right, that he ended up playing for the 49ers offense. And it was just a perfect fit. And sometimes when it's too perfect, it's like, man, it can't even happen, right? It can't happen because it's too perfect. It makes too much sense. But yes, it did happen. Deebo Samuel ended up going in the second round for the 49ers, number 36 overall. I did give this an A. He wasn't my number 1 wide receiver. My number 1 wide receiver that year was DK Metcalf, who was still on the board, but I still loved the fit and loved the player in Deebo Samuel. He was my number 3 wide receiver that year, and he ended up being the 3rd wide receiver selected. And I thought it was just a perfect fit, and wasn't shocked at all that the Niners went with Deebo Samuel. Again, an A then and an A now.
Definitely have to give it an A for sure. And that was a guy who I mocked to the 49ers. I did this thread on either draft day that morning. I did like this mock draft thread, and I had the 49ers taking him in the second round. Now, I did have them taking him with the thought in mind that DK Metcalf would be off the board, and he too was my wide receiver 1. So the fact that DK was sitting there, someone asked me, who the 49ers take right now? I said, I think they take Deebo Samuel, but my heart says they need to take DK Metcalf. And I know a lot of people think stylistically that wasn't quite a fit, but I don't know, man. I feel like if you have a solid quarterback, DK Metcalf, he's an easy person to throw the ball to. But they definitely made the right decision drafting Deebo Samuel, and big-time difference maker. And when you look at some of the other receivers that went before him, N'Keal Harry, from everything that I had heard, and I don't know how true it is because, 49ers, they're really tight-lipped with a lot of things they do, but the thought out there was that the 49ers would have taken N'Keal Harry if he were still on the board. And maybe things work out different if he goes to the 49ers. Really difficult offense to play in with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You got Tom Brady as your quarterback at that time. Hard to grasp. I remember Cam Newton saying the kid's just thinking too much, getting caught up in the Patriot way. So maybe if he goes to the 49ers, the trajectory of his career is a little different. But I did not have N'Keal Harry as a top 5 receiver in that class. So clearly I wasn't as high on him. It was definitely more excited to see the 49ers take Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, shame on the New England Patriots for taking N'Keal Harry over DK Samuel, but they really helped out the 49ers with that one. If they were indeed going to take N'Keal Harry.
You call him DK Samuel. But DK, Samuel, and AJ. Shoot, all of them.
Dude, and the 49ers in round 3 were a couple picks away from getting Deebo and DK Metcalf. Although
you think they would have did it?
Dude, I get the feeling Kyle Shanahan wouldn't have liked DK, that he wasn't his style, that he would have still taken Jalen Hurd in round 3. And this is where the draft started to get really weird for me. And I was
real quick. Peacock, okay. we talk a lot about DK Metcalf, Kyle Shanahan being a control freak, right? We talked about that on the last episode. And passing on DK at that time, unless it's health issues, which he did have a neck injury. Mm-hmm. There was that, and there were the concerns with that. But if you weren't concerned with that, and all the medicals checked out, and you say, DK Metcalf, nah, not my cup of tea, and you have a chance to get him at the top of the 3rd round, or even trade back into the 2nd round and get him late there, how do you not do that? If you, I feel like that was the easiest thing. 6'4", 230 pounds, ran 4.33. A lot of his issues that people talked about, not a great route runner. Okay, don't have him change direction. Don't have him do a double move, slants, over route, crossing routes, digs, post routes, go routes. He does all those at an extremely high level because he's so explosive off the line. How do you not utilize that? I think some of it's same with Deebo Samuel, how people think Oh, only Kyle Shanahan knows how to use Deebo Samuel. Like, no, Deebo is a great football player. I think he'd be good on both teams.
Yeah, Deebo be good on any team, and I think
How
DK
hard is it
Metcalf.
to just throw a screen to Deebo Samuel and have him take it 50 yards? Like, yeah, I mean, like, oh man, this coordinator can't do that. He can't call a screen to Deebo Samuel.
I was reminded listening to that podcast earlier because I was trying to listen for what my grades were, and I'd forgotten about my original nickname for Deebo Samuel was Slant God.
Yeah,
Slant God. He averaged 31 yards per catch on slants in college.
crazy,
He averaged
crazy.
31 yards on slants, and you could see it. And you can see it now. It's like, yeah, the dude's ridiculous with the ball in his hands, and he's just a good pure receiver too. So he'd be good in the offense. So would DK Metcalf. Teams really overthought the DK Metcalf stuff. He was my shadow 49ers pick. DK Metcalf was, but I loved the Deebo Samuel pick as well. And obviously Deebo's been awesome in Kyle Shanahan's offense, especially last year. And so when it comes to dude, and like you look, we're talking about maybe Kyle Shanahan didn't like DK Metcalf, but what if instead of Deebo, you were like the Cardinals and the Colts and the Eagles taking JJ Arcega-Whiteside or Andy Isabella or Paris Campbell over DK Metcalf? Like, what about those? Like,
Yeah,
one thing saying maybe he's not my guy, I'm going to take Deebo instead. It's something else altogether. Say, I'm not going to take this freak who wins on routes, who's really good. I'm going to take this 5'8" dude who wins to a lesser degree on the same routes. Andy
right.
Isabella was 5'8", but a deep ball guy. He wasn't even that jitterbug like Wes Welker get open in the slot. He was a straight line-ish downfield dude, but 5'8". DK Metcalf was that, but
He was a
better.
lot like Brandon Cooks. He was like poor man's Brandon Cooks. And Brandon
Yeah, he
Cooks was the guy who at Oregon State won the Biletnikoff Award, but a little tightly wound, a little stiff, kind of as a route runner
For
and
a
whatnot,
short
but
guy,
still
yeah.
really good football player. And Isabella was a poor man's version of Cooks. You don't take that over DK Metcalf.
And JJ Arcega-Whiteside, like we saw him locally at Stanford. He just wasn't like, what? You can take that guy over? I mean, he's fine. He was an okay prospect. You take him over DK Metcalf? What is wrong with you? So, unless you have to fire your scouting staff if you're those teams, unless it was the doctors, the medical. If they red flagged you medically and it's like this guy's not gonna have a career, that's one thing. But I don't know. I don't get the DK Metcalf thing. But I was not happy about the next pick for the 49ers. I did not like the Jalen Hurd selection at all. I thought it was about 3 rounds too high. Hearing Kyle Shanahan talk about Jalen Hurd after the draft, though, made a little bit more sense, but I thought they might have even were planning to move him to tight end because they talked about how big he was and that he might actually play bigger for the 49ers. And I was like, well, but you already have, like, I don't know, what's the play here with a high 3rd round pick for Jalen Hurd. And of course it ended up being the injuries really above all else that derailed his career. Who knows what he would have been? Would he have been a starting player? I don't know. But it was just a weird pick from the start. And then really with a couple of draft picks in 2019, which is why the 49ers, I think, changed gears with how they evaluate injured players in the draft and overall on their roster because they had to deal with so many injuries. Jalen Hurd, I gave him a C- grade, and I felt like that was even higher than how I felt at the time. I gave him a C-, but now it looks like an F because he's literally given the 49ers 0 production, and he was a high 3rd round pick. You should be drafting starters there.
It's an F, 100%, right? Definitely an F. I will say, watching Deebo Samuel and Jalen Hurd in that first preseason game against the Dallas Cowboys and kind of seeing what kind of tandem that can potentially be, that was exciting. And it sucks that we just never saw it again.
You know what's funny is the wide receiver who plays running back plan might have been a different receiver from the same draft. It might have been Hurd getting that usage instead of Deebo. Or maybe both of them. You got 2 wide backs.
Listen, Jalen Hurd, watching him, I remember Jalen Hurd, the running back out of Tennessee. Okay, he's at Baylor. And I just didn't see a whole lot of on him pre-draft. And I didn't watch him pre-draft. And I remember watching him, and I hit my guy Rob Louder out. Shout out to my guy Rob Louder. I hit him up, and I'm like, I think I like this guy. Like he had quick feet. The change of direction was like great. He was very fluid for someone as big as he was. And I'm like, man, if he can just start to get a little bit more natural at catching the football, like he can be dangerous. He played fast in the sense of pushing vertically, but he just wasn't fast. So it wasn't like he was just going to outrun people. But it's all right. He's 6'5", 230 pounds. He can work on the contested catch aspect of it. And if he improves on that, then he's going to be good. Then you watch him, the first preseason game is Cowboys, and you see the screen, and you see him fluid, and he's moving, and he runs over a guy. Then you see the crossing route, and he catches it and runs over guys going into the end zone. Then you see them throw the fade ball, and he catches it. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. Like, they got something here. It's very unfortunate that it never worked out. But now, definitely an F. I'd say at the time, I would have given it a C+ after watching him. Maybe if you would have caught me like when they drafted him, I know my response was, why didn't you trade up a couple spots for DK Metcalf?
And yeah, exactly. Or like, and why so high for Jalen Hurd? Because nobody had him that high. Maybe a team would have loved him and drafted him, but it was just an overdraft for the start. He was a former running back that played purely in the slot at Baylor for 1 year at wide receiver, and he had injuries on top of it. Couldn't even work out pre-draft that much. I think he did run a 40, but he couldn't do a lot of stuff. He couldn't play in the Senior Bowl because he was hurt. So there was enough there to be like, this is not a guy you have to force into the top of the third round. He was a 5th round pick. And so for that, that was the worst part of the pick. And it was one of those red flags that ended up, hurting him in his career. But I think he could have ended up actually being pretty good for the 49ers if he wouldn't have got hurt. Because like you said, his hands were natural for an ex-running back. And he did have that short area burst. He wasn't a burner down the field or anything, but that's plenty to get open. We're seeing it right now with Juwan Jennings. He was probably a more athletic version of Juwan Jennings, right?
Yeah. Better version. Just a little quicker, more setting, bigger. I mean, much bigger. He was a legit, he was a shade under 6'5".
Yeah.
Which is crazy because at running back, he was listed at 6'3", because they didn't want to have a running back listed at 6'5" on paper because it's too big at running back.
The only guy in college football history to purposely be listed shorter than he is. Everyone else gets an extra inch. He got an 1.5 inches taken off.
Yeah, he was a shade under 6'5". So his short shuttle was like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was the thing. Remember, Shanahan only drafts people that are sub 7 seconds in the short shuttle or in the 3-cone. It was the 3-cone, not the short shuttle. 3-cone was the Shanahan number, but yeah, short shuttle too. Yeah. Speaking of wide receivers, let's finish the wide receiver portion of this podcast. Do you remember the one wide receiver that we both missed on? I know I missed on for sure, really hard in that draft because we get a lot right.
Terry McLaurin.
We talk about a lot. Well, I missed.
Oh no, you're talking about the guys that we liked in. Hakeem Butler.
Hakeem Butler. I was high on Hakeem Butler. Yeah, he wasn't on my shadow 49ers because DK Metcalf was there and he's my wide receiver 1. But I was really high on Hakeem Butler, and I even thought he was going to make it because. I think it was last year, was it, that the Philadelphia Eagles moved him to tight end. And I was like, okay, now it's Hakeem Butler time. He's going to be an okay tight end because he's so tall, but he's just too sluggish, and I don't know what else. I still thought he could have been something. I don't know what happened, but the league didn't like him, and the league was right, and I was way wrong on Hakeem Butler. I was way too high.
Here's the thing with some of these guys, and even with how you evaluated him, because, I thought he would go either late second, early third, and I didn't, not saying he was going to be this great player, but you see a skill set, and it's like, man, if they can get him to do this more, right? And we can say that with quarterbacks, right? Like, oh man, if you can get Trey Lance to throw this pass more right here, like he's going to be great. That's the same thing with Hakeem Butler. Like, man, if you can get him to use that throw that speed more, because he was a guy that ran in the 4.4s at 6'5" or 6'6", whatever he was, and he was another guy, very fluid, and like he was that guy, but you just didn't see it all the time. And you wonder why. And he's letting these little DBs cut his routes off, slant route. And how do you let the corner cross your face, pick it off, take it to the crib? You're seeing these things, and you're like, man, I don't like it. Is that him or is it things I can coach? And I always think, okay, let me try to coach him up. And clearly, he either wasn't a guy that was very coachable or didn't want to put the work in. And guys sometimes are bust because of things outside of what we can factor as people that are just sitting at the computer screen watching all 22 on the guy.
Yep. It's a good lesson too. And I don't know if this is exactly why Hakeem Butler missed, but it is for a lot of players. It's what makes a lot of players great and why a lot of players miss. And it's how bad you want it. Do you want it worse than anything? Are you going to work your butt off for it? Work ethic is so important. It's one of the missing elements. Sometimes you can tell, but sometimes you can't. So being a couch GM, that's one thing you don't really know is the medical or who a person is. And man, if you're talented enough to be invited to the NFL Combine and you've got the drive and you're going to put in the work, you can be a really good player. And a lot of teams prioritize that, and still they miss a lot. But man, it is really the most important factor of a player being good or especially great. All right. Next, we got to get into day 3 of the draft and the pick I disliked the most from the 2019 draft and the pick I got the most wrong in my original grades of the 2019 draft. But first, we got to talk about Bet Online, your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. You want to bet on those San Francisco 49ers to win the Super Bowl next year? They've got the odds up. They've already got week 1 odds. You want to bet on Baker Mayfield's revenge game in week 1, Browns at Panthers? That should be fun. The odds are there, and that line is changing at betonline.net. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including Major League Baseball, golf, boxing, MMA, celebrity boxing match between a pair of ex-NFL running backs is coming up soon. BetOnline, your continued source for all that, not just sports wagering, but information as well. Live betting, esports, and more. So get over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about all the trends and all the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Croc, what were your original thoughts the moment it was announced that the 49ers used the 110th pick after moving down from the very top of the 4th round a few picks to draft Utah punter Mitch Wishnowsky?
I wasn't as down on it as you were, and I remember listening to you talk about that, but I did feel like it was kind of a throwaway pick. And it was like, okay, if they like him this much, I guess. So the way I spun it was, guys miss on 4th round picks, at least you know he's going to be on the team. At least you know he's going to be on the field and he's going to be contributing to some aspect as opposed to it being a guy that's never going to play or make the team or, question mark. So that was the only way I could spin it to where I somewhat could understand it.
It was insane, first of all, just to draft a 4th round punter because they don't make that big of an impact on the game. And how much better you have to be than a replacement level punter to draft one that high, because Mitch Wishnowsky's been fine, but clearly, if they would have waited and drafted a 5th round punter, if Mitch Wishnowsky wasn't there, they'd have been all right with Jake Bailey. If they waited and just signed an undrafted free agent punter, they would have been fine. It was just like, whatever. It was a throwaway pick. But what's funny is they were drafting in 2019 with those 3rd and 4th round picks. To me, they with the Hurd pick, which was sort of a let's have fun with this pick and make a weird pick, and then with the Wishnowsky pick, a punter in the 4th round, they were a team that drafted 2nd overall that year, but they were drafting like they were a Super Bowl team with a Super Bowl roster, and it turns out they did have a Super Bowl roster because they went to the Super Bowl. So I guess the team was better than we realized, even though they were drafting 2nd overall. But that was the thing to me, is like, how are you using these throwaway picks? You need a lot more talent because this is a team that was so bad you're drafting 2nd overall. But it turns out they ended up being a Super Bowl roster. So, the throwaway picks, as we called them, didn't really hurt that bad. But, the Mitch Wishnowsky, I don't know what kind of grade would you give that pick now? I would still say it's, whatever. It's a D. It's not an F. It's for you. But like, what impact is Mitch Wishnowsky making when you could have drafted other players? Like, before they traded down in the 4th round, the guy that I had as my 3rd round shadow.
Let me guess.
Yeah.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Boom. You remember the Shadow 49ers well, Croc. So yeah, my Shadow 49ers picks were Nick Bosa, DK Metcalf, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was still there at the very top of the 4th round before they traded down. He wasn't there anymore at 110 when the 49ers took a 4th round punter. But that's like draft starters in the 3rd round, draft starters on your offense or defense in the 4th round, and high in the 4th round. And they were, drafting special teamers and, sort of some picks that a rich team would be drafting, but it didn't hurt him. And overall, still a very good draft. But the one I got really wrong was the Dre Greenlaw pick, because while you could see the speed on the field from Dre Greenlaw, when I watched him play, I was like, there's no way this guy's going to play early. He can't stand up against the run. He gets washed out against the run, tries to run around blocks. And I like the athleticism, but he didn't run that well. He ran like 4.7s.
Yeah,
we found out later he had
for a smaller guy who was
an undersized guy.
A safety previously.
Yeah, former safety, and he looked like a safety. He was short. He's only 5'11", So it was like, man, he ran a 4.7, and you're going to draft this dude in the 5th round. I don't know if he's going to play right away. I thought he was going to be a special teams guy early on too, but he played well as a rookie, and he's not a perfect player. I think but he's good, and he's much better than than what I thought he was going to be, especially against the run, because I was worried because I didn't think he could take on blocks at all. But I mean, it's to get a starting caliber linebacker in the 5th round. Like, is that an A? Is it a B? I don't know what you give that grade for Dre Greenlaw, but it's much better than I thought it was right after the draft in 2019. I definitely got Dre Greenlaw wrong.
I definitely have to give it a B+. I don't think you can give it an A. For it to be an A, he would have to be, not saying he had to be George Kittle, who was a 5th round pick, and obviously we've seen what he's done. But can he be a consistent starter? And, he has missed time and things like that. And when I say consistent starter, and do stand out, like have you made a Pro Bowl or something like that? If you can go back, not the same because Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a 4th round pick, but what Chauncey Gardner-Johnson has meant to the Saints defense, I feel like outweighs what Greenlaw has been to the 49ers defense, although he has been good. Like, he's been solid. But I give it a B+.
Just because it's a 5th rounder, I think you have to look at it like, is it an A just to get a guy who can start in the 5th round? Because it is a 5th.
Yeah. That can be.
I mean, so I could buy. I'm going to say B+. I like that. I think that works. But what was your Mitch Wishnowsky grade, by the way?
Yeah, D. He's been very inconsistent as a punter.
Yeah,
he's very inconsistent.
A borderline F, just because of where he was drafted. If he was 7th rounder, it'd be fine, whatever, C+ or something. But yeah, so D. So yeah,
you brought him in to be Dickinson or whatever, the guy for the Seahawks.
Yeah, Dixon. Yeah, and even then, it's like you got to be that. And he was older than the guy he was replacing. He's already going to be 30 years old this year, Mitch Wishnowsky, before his rookie contract's over. It's like, so you draft the 27-year-old punter in the 4th round. Like, he's got to be great. And he hasn't been great. He's fine. Like, I don't dislike Mitch Wishnowsky. It was the where you drafted him. It was just completely.
He's already 30. And he wears the nastiest sleeves. It's like a.
He's Australian. He comes from a different sport. I like that about him, actually. I like his sleeves. I like that. Like, you see him, you're like, that's something different about him. It's like, yeah, he doesn't care about Crocs. Revo. What is it? What's the helmet you like?
Shut.
The Shut. Oh, is that it back there? Okay, the Shut. Yeah. All right. So we've got a couple of A's in the first 2 picks. We've got an F with the round 3 pick of Jalen Hurd. We've got a D with Mitch Wishnowsky in the 4th, and a B+. There we go. Look at that. Croc's ready to light somebody up right now with the Shut.
I'm ready to play football.
Do the sidebars ever get in your way when you're looking, like, in your peripheral? Does it mess
Nah, after a while you don't even see it.
Okay.
That's why when you see guys like Jawan Jennings, and he has like no bars here, and that's fine if you don't have like the no bars. But then he doesn't have this second bar here, and it's just gross. It's gross. You don't wear that.
That guy wants to see the ball coming, man. He wants some clear vision.
Devontae Adams wears this. He has no issues catching the football.
Yeah, that's true. It does look good. I like the looks of that one. It's a good helmet. Croc always clean.
Antonio Brown. I mean, the list goes on and on. Like, Antonio Brown never had an issue catching the football. That's the helmet he wore.
Yep.
And face mask.
Good point. You're not going to leave it on for the rest of the pod?
Nah.
Okay. All right, we got to get into the very late picks here. And look, and I think you do have to grade them on a curve. These are late picks. A lot of times 6th and 7th rounders don't make the team. The 49ers had 3 6th-round picks. And their first 6th-round pick was Caden Smith, the tight end out of Stanford. And he ended up getting cut from the 49ers, catching on with the Giants. And now I believe he's been released by the Giants. It looked like the 49ers might have let one get away at first.
Yeah.
But it turns out, he hasn't really made that much of an impact. But he was. It's really hard to grade this because you shouldn't expect too much from a 6th-round tight end. But he ended up not sticking on the team. But he ended up being okay. So they weren't wrong about liking him, at least as an NFL player. But yeah, he didn't stick. So it's a D.
Well, it was weird because when you watch him, it definitely looked like a miss right away. He played 9 games for the Giants in that year, right? They got him kind of late in the year, I believe it was, and had 31 catches, had 3 touchdowns. And that was like immediately after the 49ers had let him go. But that was the best version of him because after that, I mean, started a bunch of games too. 2020 started 12 games and had less catches than he had playing half the games the year before. So
Yeah, and so that was the thing with Caden Smith when I watched him around the draft time. There was nothing that really stood out. And Stanford tight ends, it's almost like, man, automatic. This is going to be a mid-round pick. He's going to be good in the NFL. But it's like, man, he was missing something. He wasn't really a great blocker. He didn't really have any sort of athleticism that made you feel like, okay, he's got a little something to him. There's something extra there. He was just kind of like, it just never really felt like he had anything that was going to carry him into his NFL career. You got to have one or the other. You know, are you a block first tight end? Are you a beast out there taking on defensive ends? No. Okay. Well, can you get open consistently, make an impact in the passing game? I didn't really see either one of those out of him. And it was weird that all of a sudden he showed up at the Giants after getting released by the Niners and started doing some things. But then that stopped very quickly. But yeah, 18 catches and 12 starts. That's not great. So they weren't necessarily wrong that he was a NFL player, but they didn't get anything out of him. So I don't know. What is it? Is it an F? What do you grade that?
I'd say a D because he did do a little something with another team.
Okay.
But now it looks like, I mean, he's a free agent, so he's kind of out of the league, and we'll see if he ends up back in the league. But man, that's the NFL. It happens fast. Played 3 years, and now he's a free agent.
And I guess you can't.
And you don't make a ton of money, right? I've talked about that a little bit. When you are a 6th round pick, you have a nice little signing bonus. And then over 3 seasons, he maybe made a total of 1.2 before taxes or something like that. Like, you know, nothing too crazy. So we're saying maybe after taxes, 500,000 maybe in 3 years.
Got to pay your agent. You got to pay for whatever, like trainer, right? Taxes, obviously. So you don't end up with a lot. You need that second contract. And
he was playing in New York. So, I mean, the housing market there, probably in New Jersey, crazy.
Yeah. Not cheap to live either. Yeah, you're right. What about Justin School? I feel like Justin School's been around so much, and I still don't know anything about him. I remember he was like a bad body. It was like, because I didn't watch him pre-draft. The 49ers drafted him. I was like, wow, he's got a bad body, but he can block a little bit, you know, and he's kind of hung on. I think he's still on the roster, right? He
was hurt last year.
Yeah, he was hurt all year. We'll see if he has a chance to stick again. But he's made some, he's played some games. So
he's made some starts and has had to play. I'd give that a C minus.
C minus? Okay.
Yeah, I like get a guy, or I'll say a C, just a solid C, because he's played kind of a reserve role, had to fill in. I believe he had to fill in that 2019 season that helped the 49ers get to the Super Bowl. So
yeah. He's a try-hard guy, never going to wow you, but the 49ers have a lot of those guys right now, so I feel like his days are numbered and sticking on the 49ers roster. How about Tim Harris, the 49ers' final selection in the 2019 draft? Tons of injury history dating back to his days at Virginia, and that continued into the NFL. He did get into 3 games, I believe, with the 49ers, which is 3 more than the Niners' 3rd-round pick, Jalen Hurd, but really made 0 impact. But he was a 6th-round pick as well. But, whatever. It's an F because he didn't really ever do anything for the 49ers. Right?
I also didn't like him coming out of college. When I was watching this film, I'm just like, but, drafted late, so whatever, we'll see. And then you got nothing from him, so that's got to be an F.
Yeah. And it's hard with those 6th-round picks. You're kind of nitpicking because you can't expect too much from them. But, a couple of A's for sure with Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel, and a B+ for Dre Greenlaw, really carrying that class, a really important class for the 49ers, difference-making players. And overall, if Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel's trajectory continue into their career, it doesn't matter what the rest of the class does. It's an A class because you get that much impact from those 2 guys, and it really makes up for the Jalen Hurd pick and really drafting a punter in the 4th round. It doesn't matter if you get guys that are that good in rounds 1 and 2, like Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel.
Yeah. And again, Dre Greenlaw, you plug him in on that as well. Like you said, B+. Yeah. I think that's definitely a solid draft. That's a good draft.
Yeah, you get 3 starters from a draft. It's a good draft. You get 3 starters and 2 of them are superstars.
Oh, 4 starters when you include the punter. Well, See, that's what I said. It kind of makes it a little bit, makes it look a little better.
At least you're getting production. I mean, it's better than Jalen Hurd, right? The Wisniewski pick's better than Hurd. Get something from him for sure.
Hurd's no longer in the league either, huh? That's crazy.
He didn't catch on with anybody.
Crazy.
Pretty crazy, man. I'm feeling it, man. I tried to play basketball last week, and my knee's been wrecked the entire week. I just have to retire from basketball. I've got the Jalen Hurd knee going on. It's like, I can't do it. Can't do it. Even on hardwood, can't do it. All right, good stuff. That is the 2019 draft retrospective for the 49ers. What do you think? What would you grade the 49ers haul from 2019 or their draft overall? Hit us up on Twitter at BDPeacock, at Eric_Crocker, or let us know in the YouTube comments. Thanks for making us your first listen. Croc and I back next week right here, getting close to training camp. Locked On 49ers.